Greetings everyone, I'm George from Pavliscak Studios, and this evening I will be making a glass marble on a propane oxygen torch. I'll be starting with Moretti crystal glass rods, and I'll be making a monster eye this evening. It will start off with the base color as one half of the hemisphere. I will add silver foil in the middle, add clear on the top, and then start sculpting the eyelids and the detail of the iris pupil and the decoration around the back. So, I have my flame on. I'm going to turn it down a little bit because I'm going to talk about the silver. I have a special pair of tweezers that are very thin for handling the silver leaf. I keep it in a special closed container. I have it pre-cut into the sizes that I want to use, and the size that I would like to use is a 1/16 of a sheet. There it is, and there's the rouge paper on the back. I'll leave that on my little marvering plate, which is a graphite marvering plate, next to my torch. And as I pick this up, that little piece of rouge paper will vaporize because the glass is so hot. So I'm setting that little piece down, and since I'm thinking someone might come in the door, I'm going to take my little tweezers and just hold the edge of the silver foil down, because all it takes is one breeze and it'll blow away. A lot of people have their own methods for keeping silver leaf available yet secure on their workspace while they're working. One is to have a spray bottle or an atomizer with some water in it, and you spray your marver plate and stick the copper or the silver or gold leaf to your marver plate, and then pick it up. Water evaporates and the glass picks up the leaf, but air movement won't dislodge it. Then there's other ways. I've heard some people using just glass rods, or a glass rod that they've specially made with a little point that holds it down. I like using my clean, dry tweezers, just holding a corner of it, because then I can carefully move it away in a peeling motion, and that's been very good for me. Alright, so I'm going to, the base color of my marble is going to be light blue, but decoration I'm going to use is a stringer or a thread, and it's going to have two colors in it, and I have to make that, even though I'm using it at the end, I have to pre-make it, and that's really the only prep I have to do for this marble, unless I was going to do some other thread decorations on the outside. I do have a dense black rod that I've pulled in advance down to about 3 millimeters for the pupil. This will last for many dozens of monster eyes. So let's get to the stringer. That is one of the more fun things to see when glass blowers are working, doing prep work. You know, if you're not blowing a big bubble and having stuff crash to the floor, doing pulling canes or pulling threads is pretty fun. So I turned up my propane and oxygen to a neutral flame. I'm flashing these rods by waving them through the fire to get them up to a temperature so that they won't crack and explode. Once they get past that temperature, I should be able to calm down the movement of the rods. I just leave them in there so that they start to melt. When they melt on the end, I'll show you that. Some people call it a tier. I generally refer to it as a gather, or a rod gather, if I'm describing different types of glass working in the same context. So here's a gather where the rod has started forming a ball, and it's getting a little liquidy, and gravity wants to pull it down. And what I want to do is, with that gather, I'm going to heat down this rod by about an inch, and I'm going to take that gather and make a slug down one side of this rod that's heated enough so that it will stick. like that. So I've added that slug of blue glass on that purple rod, and it's very hot. You can see it wants to bend around. Now I'm going to attach a steel handle right in between where the blue and the purple meet. Then I'm going to melt this purple rod off, trying to not take any of the blue with my purple rod and leave it right on that gather. And it got a little funny shape. So we'll laugh. Oops, that little piece. I was going to try to push that in, but it came off. So I'm going to heat it and collapse it just a little bit so it's a little more even. So when I make a spiral out of it, I'll be able to use all of the spiral, or most of the spiral, for the decorating. Whatever you end up not using for the decorating is great for also decorating beads. You can throw those little ends in with custom colors that you're going to mix. Like I just need, I'll just take like all the little blue pieces on my bench and mix them together and pull it into a thread, and I can use that to make flowers. So now I've heated that piece of glass and I'm starting to spin it. And as I spin it, I'm going to spin it pretty fast and then pull it into a thread I'm going to decorate with. And it came out very badly. So let's do it again. This time I won't try to show it to you in the magnifying glass because it really got solid there. So this is okay. Oh, sorry. This is alright. Maybe for just that little piece right there. Some of it's a little on the lumpy side. That's fine. I'm going to take, see, I have some like uneven looking end bits. I'm going to get rid of those. We'll start over. I basically just heated up the attachment rod right where it joins the glass. Got really hot. And then I'm able to pull that piece off. I just set it aside. It's small, so it shouldn't expand or crack too badly. Alright, let's try again. And then however this works out, we'll go with it. Even though I was flashing it, that rod had some cracks in it from me messing that up earlier. Talking and trying to focus your attention in one direction is something I've practiced a lot, but it still tends to distract me a little bit, I think. Alright, so we're going to try it the opposite way this time. I'm going to lay a purple slug on the blue rod, and then rather than try to put it on some steel handles, I'm just going to do it the attached rod way. There'll be some messy stuff on the ends. And that's okay. I'll heat the whole thing up and then let it cool down just a little bit and then start spinning it. Now I'm going to spin it faster and faster as I pull it out. And then as I feel like I'm losing the ability to work the glass, I'm going to get it out to its final thickness of 2 millimeters. I prefer decorating diameter. And I was able to get a nice end. That end. Stop wiggling. And then this is a little bit long, so I'm going to melt it in half. And now you see on this end, there's some purple still on that end. I'll go back and fix that later. This will be very nice for decorating. You can see the swirls on this came out very even. That's what I like to see for one of my decorating threads. Alright, so that was our prep work. That took a little longer than I was planning. So we are going to switch over to making our marble. So there's a couple ways to get the initial gather. In some pictures I was drawing upstairs, you can cut little pieces of rod and stack them in like a hexagonal array around a base rod, which is nice, especially if you're not going to mix all the colors together, if you want it to be striped, which is kind of a fun, an easy decoration method. If you're just getting started in marbles and you want to practice making stuff round, using that hexagonal packing array of rod segments is a great way to get your gather fairly fast over a torch, mix those colors together, and then practice your rounding and sphering of the marble, and you get a nice design. And you can leave those marbles in a dish as you're learning marbles. Great inspiration to make more marbles and get better and make your designs more complicated, or to fix your sphericalness. Or if you're just taking a marble class and those are the only marbles you're going to make that year or ever, enjoy them as they are. Sometimes you can do things and you finish them. That is enough. That experience was all you were looking for. For me, I'm always looking for the next weird step that I can add in between other steps or as a final step to make things more complicated or simpler. A lot of times you'll find a technique and you'll refine it over time, and it gets more and more complicated. You're adding more and more steps. Then you realize, wow, I've really meandered in this technique. Let's cut off like a little oxbow lake, cut off a lot of those techniques and weird things that we've been doing to get to the end of the technique that we like. And hopefully you learned a lot of stuff on the way and use those techniques elsewhere. So I'm twirling these rods together, heating them, and then I change the angle a little bit and let the gather roll over the rod, and that's adding to the volume of the gather. I let it get cold there, so I'm going to have to catch up again. But I'm always looking to enjoy the exploration of the technique and enjoying the process of what I'm doing. So easy to get caught up in the production mindset. Oh, I have to finish this. Oh, I have to make 5 more of these. Oh, I made 1 and it was nice. Wouldn't it be nice if I had more of these? I want to sell them and make money and stuff like that. So for me, earrings are like that, because I like to utilize all the techniques that I've learned to make earrings, and once I've made them and they're done, they're like my bread and butter, whereas marbles are like my creative portion of my work, and so I like to keep that more playful, more observational and improving, more meditative. But when a nice marble comes out, that is very gratifying. Alright, so I've got actually quite a nice big gather there. And this needs to be just a hemisphere of glass, and we're going to put some silver on there and then make the other half of the marble out of clear. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. We're basically just going to take this whole gather and press it into a hemispherical graphite mold and try to make it even so that the rod is fairly centered in the hemisphere, and violas, there it is. There's the rod kind of centered there. Now we're going to do most of the rest of the work of this marble from the other side. So I'm going to make a nice firm attachment handle with this stainless steel rod on the same axis as the rod that's still attached to this. So I'll attach this and then I'll melt off that existing blue rod. And I might have to go back and do a little fill, because you can see when I was pushing it into the mold, I sort of pushed in that rod into the center and it sort of squished in like you were playing with clay. I'm going to heat that surface, which is going to become the disc that we'll pick up the silver with. And if I can heat it and get those little valleys to close up more naturally without pushing it, maybe they'll close up without trapping air, which is always a problem later, because once that air gets trapped inside, if you're controlling your heat on the inside of the marble, that trapped air can start to move around unpredictably if you're not paying attention. If you are paying attention, you can get that bubble to move around where you'd like it. I'm not doing that here. I don't want to do that here, so you can see that's starting to close up. Now, in the middle of that nub, I'm going to get everything hot. I'm going to push in the middle of the nub, and that nub is going to come in and mushroom out from underneath and close up the rest of that gap without trapping air. Magic. That's one of the things that you struggle with so long. See, that closed up really nice. And I did actually a couple things in there that describing them probably won't do you any good unless this is something you're already mindful of when you're working on it. Beads or marbles, any sculptural solid work of any size, really. Trapping air can be a problem. Alright, so we got that closed up and pretty flat. Now I'm going to heat that surface, flat disc, pick up my silver, which is right next to me here. I'm going to get rid of this little tweezer. I did that peel away motion, just very gently releasing the pressure off that foil, because that foil, I'm calling it foil, but it's actually leaf, can grab onto anything, and since it's almost no mass, it'll just suck right to a rod or right to a tool and basically vanish. So keeping it flat is pretty important. And so I'm going to approach, grab, so that it can't slip away from me. So I have it centered, I'm about an inch away, and then bam, I grab it. That rouge paper burned off. You can see a slight black mark. I'm going to push down the edges of the foil, grab all the way, just hit it with the flame a little bit, and now you can see that silver is attached to that surface. I need to keep this whole thing warm while I start getting my clear gather. So this is a big clear rod. I'm going to get basically 2 or 3 big gathers, melt it till there's a ball on the end, squish it onto this silver. Doing it at the right temperature is, I guess you could say, important. It's kind of a feel thing. You want the glass of the hemisphere that you've been working on with the silver attached to be hot, but not quite, but firm, not about to move. So if the glass is going to be moving at, between 12 and 1500 degrees, you want it down cooler than that, probably hotter than that. All right, so I stopped flashing my clear rod, and now I can start bringing it into the flame and start getting my gather. Once you see the tip start turning orange, I'm going to put it over by the magnifying glass for a second. That's when you can really start melting it. I can see there's a few tiny bubbles on the end of this clear rod. And so if you see me switching hands and grabbing a tweezers and poking at this one, I'm just going to get in there and grab a few tiny bubbles out of that gather. If we give the camera a second, you might catch those. It's really hard to see. The combination of wearing these sodium flare reduction spectacles and having the glass at its working liquid temperature where it's orange, you can really see all the defects in the glass. By the time I get it over to the magnifying glass and wait for the camera to adjust, really the heat that shows those imperfections has faded. So if I do pick these out, it's almost impossible to show without having a special filter on the camera lens and having the camera lens on a macro. So now that I've explained the crap out of it, I'm going to just go and do that. Alright, I got it. And now you can see that gather is getting big. It's hot, it's flopping down. Give it another 30 seconds. I want the first one to be big, and I want to cover that silver completely, because if I try to melt it once it's on there and any of the silver is exposed, I will burn it right off. So I'm going to put the gather on, squish it down, and then detach the rod, all in a series of fairly quick motions. And having a big gather is going to help, because having a little more volume of glass is going to give me a little more time to do those manipulations before the glass starts to freeze. And that's weird to say that the glass is freezing, but it's a liquid here at whatever 2,000 degrees about right now. And so it is going to freeze at about 1,600 degrees maybe. Alright, so here we're going to put this on the silver. I'm going to detach the rod and I'm going to press it down quickly. And cover all of that silver to clear. I'm going to keep it warm in the back flame and work on my second clear gather. I got it in the flame right now. And then this is going to go in the back. Just like that. Wow. So once I have one more gather clear on there, that will be approximately 1/3 to 1/2 of the volume of the sphere. It can be a little bit less. It can be a little bit more. Really flexible kind of design. And I've varied the size of these and varied the rods that I've used in construction over the years. This is one of the designs that I started making probably in 1999, and shortly after some books came out that they were in, and so this has been a gallery reorder item fairly regularly since then. And there's been some years where I've just said I'm not doing that this year, but I always go back to it because it's a really fun design, and really if people want your work, why not give it to them? Because it's so difficult to find a place where you're doing something, you're enjoying it, you're doing it well, and people want your work and are willing to pay for it. That's a great combination. Especially for someone like me that's their profession, is glass. You know, there's a whole bunch of different glass things that to be done, but if you're just doing it for kicks, then, you know, do whatever you want. You don't have to do the same thing over and over again. There's something to be said for doing something over and over again as a learning process. You know, the first dozen times, you're going to learn a certain lesson. the next dozen times, you may not be ready to learn anything, or you may be ready to learn something and not discover anything. And then it might be several hundred marbles later that I'm going to start to round this marble. It's pretty hot. Let's put it through the molds. So it might be 100 marbles later until you find your next aha moment where you have something, some tidbit to take away from doing that class, and maybe that applies to a whole different area. I've had that happen many times where I'm working on beads for like weeks at a time, just beads. I'm like, oh wow, I really figured out something cool here. I'm going to try that with my marbles. Alright, so the marble's getting rounder. It's not great, but at this point I'm going for an approximation, because my next step is to put the eyelids on here. And it doesn't need to be a perfect sphere for that, because I'm going to have to re-sphericalize it after I add the eyelids, which is going to be quite a bit of volume. I'll try to keep the volume down, but see how nice that silver foil looks? It's a little bit crackly, very sparkly, and when it's smooth, it's just going to look great. So, going back to my original base color, and I'm going to define the shape of the eyelids. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a really hot gather. I'm going to touch to a point and then let that hot glass drag out and attach it where it wants to go and where I want to put it, combination thereof, to define one of the eyelids, and then I'll go and do the other side. Then I'll backfill in the uncovered area, and I'll show you what that means. So I touch and I drag, and I've defined the upper or lower eyelid, and there's some space remaining. If you look at the front, you can see it's a little more eye-shaped than it was. Let's do the other one. And there we go. We'll add the second one. Make the eye shape. Now when I say backfill, I'm going to fill this clear area that's remaining. What I'll do is I'll get a big gather, I'll push in, I'll go to one direction, and then I'll pull back to the other direction to try not to trap air along the back side of that wall of glass that I've just added. More gymnastics to avoid trapping air. I got it so hot that the attachment stainless steel rod started to droop. So now I backfilled that area. This one still needs to be filled, so I'm going to do that one next. Then we'll smooth all that out. That smoothing should go pretty fast, because the whole model's pretty hot right now. There's the eye, there's the sides of the eyelids we just added. Let's heat it all up. As we push those eyelids into the surface of the sphere, it's going to shrink the area of the surface area of that eye shape. So I've made it a little bit spacious to start off with, because I know it's going to shrink. If you made it initially the size and shape that you wanted it, once you pushed it back into a sphere shape, it's going to be smaller and not the shape that you want. So I'm making the shape where it's going to eventually turn into the eye shape that I want, rather than trying to make the final eye shape. You see, it's already shrunken down a little bit, and it's already a little bit smoother. Let's heat it and put it through the mold one more time. When I put a marble through the marble mold, I'm using the gradated hemispheres. I'm going in one that's bigger than the marble to begin with. And then I'm using a little bit of pressure and spinning motion and the surface tension of the glass and gravity. And then when I've chilled the surface of the marble a little bit, I can start pushing a little bit harder, moving the inside of the marble. And that's just like for the first 3 seconds. Then, to make it more spherical, I'll go to a smaller hemisphere and I'll rotate the marble using just the rim of the mold, and then I'll change the axis of my rotation, and using just the rim around the surface of the sphere with that rotation is really pulling it into a spherical shape. Here's my eye. The eye shape. Now I'm going to add my iris pupil and some clear glass over top. The iris is going to be, let's do purple. So I want the iris to be round, so I'm going to get a nice even gather of purple. And I'm going to put it right in the middle of that space that I've created for the eye. I went straight down with a nice hot gather so that the outline would be round. Now I want it to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to use this graphite paddle, heat just the purple glass, and then push it out flat, and then into the clear. And I've increased its size. Now, I need to add the pupil. So let's repeat that process, but only with a tiny diameter black rod that I prepared in advance, just for making pupils. I got that hot gather and touched it right in the center so that the outline of it would be round, like that. A little bit off center, so when I heat that, I'm going to time and press my paddle in to try to improve the placement of that black dot. And I was able to do that. So there's the purple iris and the black pupil. Now I'm going to melt those in so that they're absolutely flat and smooth with the surrounding clear glass. I'm going to give it one more little press. And there we made it smooth. Now, I have a very nice, high quality clear rod. I'm going to flash and I'm going to cover over that iris pupil combo that I just made. And my initial gather is going to go over the edge of both of those at the same time. So it's going to be a big clear gather. I'll push straight down so I get a nice round exterior footprint. I've got a little bubble. Go ahead and get that bubble out. So that's looking good. Here's my clear gather. Get them both so that they're the right temperature for wanting to merge. So I put that clear gather over the iris, and now I'm going to use a hemispherical mold to spread out that iris even more. and it's a little bit, it's still hanging out there. So let's get it merged in with the marble. I'm heating the whole thing. I'm going to let it pull in with surface tension. When it starts to pull in, I'll run it through the molds and work with the surface tension and my pressure and my rotation to have it improve its sphericalness. And then we're down to just the exterior decoration with the purple and dark blue threads that we pulled at the beginning of the demonstration. So there, it's nice and hot. I'm going to put it through the molds. A larger diameter hemisphere and then a smaller one. Eye shape, corners of the eyes, goes from the front, and the back still plain. Now we're going to decorate. The first thing I'm going to do is define the outside of the eyelid with the thread that we made. So I'm going to turn my flame down to a little bit of a point and then just melt this into the surface and walk it around the edge. It's not directly in the flame, it's just off to the side because this little tiny thread wants to melt without much provocation and heat. I'm going to turn the flame up, heat up the whole marble again. When you're decorating with a little tiny flame like that, it's very easy to lose track of time and have your marble get too cold, or whatever you're working on, your bead. And you know, once you hear that little crack, it's too late. Your bead or your marble is ruined. At least with this old style lead crystal glass. We're ready. This is the kind of glass that they had when I started out. They have nicer glass now, but I never made the switch. So there is the outline of the eye. That'll smooth out a little bit. Right now it's bumped up. Now we're going to decorate those blue areas. Let's heat everything up. Now I'm going to do 2 or 3 lines worth of decorating. And I'll heat the marble back up. See, I started to add some of the ivy-like designs, or vein-like designs, whatever you want to call it. Now I'm going to add a few more. And I'm running out of decorating pieces, so let's see, where do they go? Ah. I'm just going to merge 2 of the pieces really quickly, so I can continue to draw. decorations. Now I'm going to add some decorations to where there are some blank spots. And there we go. A nice decoration on there. Now let's melt it all in, and we'll let that pull in a little bit. I want to do a combination of letting the surface get hot enough so it's starting to pull in before I push it. I don't want to spread the design out, but I don't want to just push it straight in either. I want a combination of those two. And that's a feel thing that I've just developed over the years. Really, if you decide to try either of the, you want to let it all pull in like that. That looks great. Pushing it all in, it's going to be harder to get smooth because you're going to trap a lot of sharp lines in the surface where the background color meets the foreground color. That may not make a lot of sense, but opaque colors are harder to give a final smoothing to. They're just a little stiffer. Most glass that you see, the outside is clear because clear is very easy to make a smooth surface on. But once you start adding more opaquing chemicals, that glass gets stiffer. More stubborn. Don't make us do that. Alright, so there we go. The back, front. You can see it's pretty spherical now. And if you see the reflection jumping, it just means the surface is not smooth yet. So, but it's pretty spherical. So I'm going to let the flame and my spinning and surface tension sort of let it pull in. Hello, people joining us right now. And that will make the surface mostly smooth and very hot. Then I'm going to let it cool a little bit and let the outside firm up, and then I'm going to use a cherry wood marble paddle that I've made. And it's essentially using just the rim because there's no hemisphere. It's basically just a burned rim and a piece of cherry wood that's soaking wet. I'll show you that in a minute. So it's like a piece of cherry wood that I've drilled a bunch of holes in, and the holes have been burned in from using the rim, the edge of the hole. And so I can come in and spin the marble in that cherry wood just on the rim, changing the axis of rotation as I spin. You can see how easy it's spinning. That means the marble is very spherical and the surface is already very smooth. So this side of the marble is basically done, unless I mess it up. So I want sort of a medium strength, very clean joint for my last attachment rod. Potentially my last attachment rod. If there's anything happens, I can always pass the marble back and forth another time to get it to turn out right. So I want a nice clean piece of glass. I want it shaped to a point, and I want that point melted. And it gives me just a little bit of grab on that marble. Not quite a cold joint, not a fused joint. Right in the middle of my eyeball. Now I can melt off this back end, this handle that's been on here almost the whole marble. And this attachment point is where all of my decoration from the dark blue and purple thread that I pulled meet. Let's get it in the magnifying glass. Let's get it into focus. There we go. So now I'm going to melt that end and pull all those to a point. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to get that end really hot. And I'm going to take my high-tech glass working tongs, jacks, get in there and make a little parting line and pull it out a little bit. Give it some twist as I pinch it off like a lathe. And so it needs to be pretty hot. And there's a little tiny marble on my bench here that I tweezed off of there. That's pretty cool. It's very hot still. That's why I picked up tweezers. Or pick up anything on your bench with your fingers. So now, if I decided I didn't like that little swirl that we had there, it came out okay. I could reheat this whole thing, go back with my jacks, and do it a second time, taking off another little piece. I'm going to look at it. I kind of like it. It looks nice. Not perfect. You can see where it came from and where it's going. It's nice. Monster Eye decoration on the back. It's not about perfection or evenness. It's about being part of something that's alive. If you do something enough, it's almost too easy to have it come out too perfect. Like I make these little vases that I'd make for farmer's market. And in the winter, these little tiny vases. So they're very popular and they're fun to make because you can do all kinds of different colors and stuff like that. But after you do like the first dozen, they start coming out so much the same. You know, you just get like in the groove. And so then you sort of have to go back and say, where am I going to put in the tiny crookedness, the tiny Dr. Seuss messed up looking off-centered something to make them look like they're handmade and not just squirted out of a press somewhere. So that's part of the fun. So the back of the marble, I've gone through the marble molds a couple times, starting in the big one, going to the little one, and we've made it spherical. It's a little bit rough yet. So now I'm going to use the flame to polish wherever I'm seeing ripples from the reflection of the light bulbs above me. I used to use long fluorescent bulbs because I thought that was a great way of seeing any imperfection in the marble surface. But having switched to LEDs a couple of years ago, these look funny. You can totally see the shape of your light bulbs. So the surface is really hot right now. And you can see it's quite smooth. But I'm going to run it through. Sometimes there's a little stubborn part on the equator. So I'm going to give that an extra couple dozen rotations here. See if it won't become truer to its spherical nature. Doing the cat paw thing helps. Alright. So I'm rotating it to keep it balanced. You can see I gotta do a little work on the shape, and so I'm gonna use my cherry wood paddle for that. There it is. A light blue monster eye with purple decoration. So now I'm going to use the jacks to chill the joint between our final connecting rod and the marble. I'm going to do it on a fire proof tile over here. It's actually a soft compressed ceramic blanket. And then once I've tapped off that last rod, I'm going to pick up my torch and I'm going to intensely heat that little nub that remains from where the rod and the marble separated. What I do is I intensely heat it, I back off, let it calm down, and do that a few times with this kind of glass, and that actually lets me see any impurities that might be left. Sometimes if there's like a blob or something of something weird, like right in the middle of the eye, I'll go back, pick the marble back up and go get it. This one is just fine. If you make sure that last connection punty is really clean and your last junction is perfect, then it will be a clean breakaway. So I preheat some marble tweezers that I've made out of coat hangers to 1,000 degrees so I can pick up the marble out of the plate, and now I can put it in the annealing oven. Be right back. And then I just quenched those in water so I don't have hot things on my bench. So I did run out almost of the decorating piece that I was using. Just this tiny short one left. A lot of times when I'm doing monster eyes, I tend to like certain color combinations, and this is one that I like. So I'll come back to this. And very often I'll have like little test tubes where I keep together all the materials I have. Like this is all of my threads that I've pulled for, it's hard to show, for my thistle flowers. There's like 4 different kinds of purple in here and 2 different kinds of green for making the flowers go from dark in the center to light on the outside, so that you can't really tell they're different. But you get that nice natural fading of color, different than just having like 2 colors or just having 1 color. And then the rods are kind of on the smaller side because the thistle petals are very pointy, so they're I want to get just little teeny tiny dots on there, so I pull them thinner than usual. But yes, and I save those for if I do want to come back to making a particular marble like that. When I have ugly stuff like this, sometimes I can use it like this. There's a piece here in the middle. I can just take off those parts that I don't want, and then take this other part that I do want, and here's the part that I got out of that other one, and we'll attach it. I didn't do a very good job. There we go. And there, we have a longer piece that I can use for decorating my next monster eye marble. Alright, well, I didn't see a lot of comments go by, so I will check and see if there's any. And thanks for coming to the demo. I'll see you next week, and I will post pictures of the demo marble that we made today, tomorrow. Alright, have a good night.